Well, heads up and buckle up. This is the session as promised that you're all looking forward to. This is the licensing session. Hey, can I hear it for the licensing session? Licensing is a very popular topic as demonstrated by you already. Let me explain why it's popular. Over here, we have the desire for simplicity in our life. The desire just to open it up and understand what's going on. I think everybody can concur that's the kind of thing that you want. So just make it simple. Just make it easy. Just give me a single price that I can understand, multiply by the number of users I have, and then I'm happy. Great. Well, we can do that for you. You can? Oh, yeah. If you want us to do that, we can do that for you. Just who are you, by the way? I'm an academic institution. We have absolutely zero money this year, but we definitely want your software. Well, we want to give you that software too. So we're going to treat you differently than, say, a commercial company or a government. So simplicity moves over to the other side of the equation, where we've just ended up, which is flexibility. So we have a flexible licensing system that addresses the needs of the customer based on the type of customer. We also have the ability to favor customers who buy a lot of stuff. So we offer something called volume licensing. By its very name, volume licensing implies the more you buy, potentially the cheaper it gets. Customers like that. So we've already got a situation over here where simplicity is replaced by choice and the desire for flexibility. And also, let's face it, if you look at Microsoft today, we have the world's leading software license regime. It is highly successful. Look at the amount of money that Microsoft makes every year from customers buying licensing. So although there is an implied desire to simplify and get it as good as we can, we also have to address the needs of the customer and make sure they're paying the right amount for the right service at the right time based upon their needs. And that, unfortunately, turns itself into complexity. So today I'm going to stand up to you and I'm going to give you a presentation on licensing, but I'm not going to give you a standard licensing presentation. I just want to give you guidance from the point of view of where you sit today, which is from a SI, a company that makes money out of consulting services, not licensing. Who in the room here, Microsoft excluded? Before I get any hands from the PT, yeah, we'll be here. Who here actually makes money from Microsoft licenses as well? Good. How are you making that money today? So you're a reseller. Okay, disty. Good. So we have some people in the room who also have a licensing business. But the context I'm going to talk today is if I was an SI consulting company, and how is it relevant to me? How does licensing help me basically optimize my customer, make sure my customer is paying the right amount of money, that they're not removing money from their budgets unnecessarily so by overpaying for a service. So, what do we have today? Here's just an overview. This is the standard deck that we have for presenting to customers or through our licensing people what we have today. But I'm going to just go through it. I'm going to talk to various points regards to a system integrator. So, we've spoken about the evolution of Office. As I say, this is a standalone deck, and this puts into context what we're currently selling. We have applications, we have clients and servers, on-premise world, and we're moving to the services of the Office 365 world. Moving forward on this, animation, I love animation. We're talking about Office 365, and we put into context what that actually means. Now, the real big story, I think, for Office 365, especially for the client, is that we've moved away from device-based licensing to user-based licensing. So what does that mean? Well, before, for the client specifically, and potentially as an option for the servers, we would license by device. So effectively, one device, one license. I have another device over here, I need another license for that. While in the new world of devices, there are multiple devices. So we moved from device-based licensing to user-based licensing. Now the opportunity from the SI's point of view is there are no licensing blockers. If I want to develop for the Windows 8 phone, if I want to develop for the Slate, if I want to develop for the PC, and I'm working for it with an enterprise customer, it allows me not to have the conversation about, are you licensed for this first? They are. User-based licensing, if it's an Office 365-based user subscription license. That, to me, is probably the top difference in terms of the licensing that happened, apart from obviously being a subscription. Other themes that we have today in licensing themes for Office 365, this is putting into context of what we've been doing. There have been no price increases, so we haven't increased the price of the service as we've moved forward. And we create new paths, which is just a code for under EA. We have transition rights, meaning people can move from a perpetual license under software assurance into an Office 365 subscription service for no more money. They basically keep their software assurance. So again, we're making a no shock for the customer. We're allowing the customer to continue understanding their budgeting needs and move, when they feel like it, into Office 365 and be licensed for that. Just to highlight a few of the benefits here. The Office 365 products that we have today, you've seen the core products that we are offering. We have Office, we have Lync, we have SharePoint Online, and we have Exchange Online. All of these are licensed under this currently. There are actually other products here, and I'm going to show you what those look like in more detail. But I'm going to talk to you about customer segments. Now, I've already indicated to you that there are differences in pricing based on which segment you're in. Here is an illustration of those segments. But there are also things to think about when looking at the segment of your customer. We've already talked about E3. Who here doesn't understand what E3 is? So E3, E stands for enterprise. You have to be very careful when talking to your customers to make sure that they buy the appropriate Office 365 suite for the size of company that they are. I would advise you, if you're dealing with a company of more than 1,000 seats, that's not necessarily saying they're going to deploy 1,000 seats of Office 365. They might be deploying 2 or 5 or 20 or 100. If they've got more than 1,000 seats, then you should be encouraging them to sign up for E or K. Now, the reason you want to do that is because we do have SKUs by market size. We've already talked about the E SKU, enterprise, the K SKU for kiosk, the M SKU for mid-market, and the P SKU for professional, which is an SMB thing. Now, the difference between those SKUs, I won't go into too much details about the difference between P and M, is that they are capped. At the M SKU side, it's capped. You do not want to sell an enterprise customer of a large seat the M SKU. On the face value, it might look like a cheap option to start with, but they will run into problems later on if they have not got the right SKU for the type of organization they are. Now, you don't have to be a licensing expert unless you're making money out of it today. The right person to ask that question is the account manager for the customer within Microsoft, or the person who owns the licensing contract between the customer and the person who provides the licenses. We sometimes refer to them as large account resellers. And if you want to also, you can obviously talk to your customer and ask them, do they have a volume license with Microsoft, and what type of volume license is that? So really, I encourage you at the beginning, don't pre-guess what type of SKU is appropriate for that customer. Get them to work with the people who provide them the licensing, who will make sure they make the right choice in terms of the license they pick up. Now, there are some variations to this. When looking at SharePoint, Lync, Exchange, and I'm going to throw an extra one in there, Project Online. Which of the following products would you consider to be enterprise-wide, as in every single desktop should have that? So would Exchange be an enterprise-wide product? Show of hands. Yep, that's right. So when selling Exchange, consider eventually it's going to be across every single desktop. When looking at things like Lync, again, would Lync be across every single desktop? Show of hands. Yep. Again, Lync, you would anticipate being across every single desktop. The final one, Project Online. Would Project Online be across every single desktop? No. So there are products that we sell. I'm going to give you another one, potentially. Depends on the company, of course, but in general. CRM Online, another example of a product that might not be on every single desktop. What that does is it gives you some variations in terms of how they may purchase the product or not. So we talked about customer segments. We talked about the positioning. You've seen the Office 365 is talking about plus 250 users. And we talked about the enterprise suites. And within the enterprise suites, enterprise customers, typically we consider an enterprise customer in corporate accounts to be anything above 250 seats. You may think that's a bit high, a bit low, sorry, but that's the way we think about it. We position the following SKUs with the customers. Notice the removal of E2. So E2 has gone. Makes our sequencing slightly out of kilt, but we got rid of it. We no longer are proactively selling E2. Yes, sir. Up to 300, the M SKU, yeah. Yeah. This is a very good point. There is a SKU that offers up to 300 users, and if you're selling to a company of 250 users or less, because let's face it, we actually started talking about it being 250. You don't want to run out of space. You don't want to run out of room. You don't want to have to make that support call to say, they've bought M SKU, now they've got 1,000 people, and what do we do, right? There's a problem there that'll be caused. So in terms of positioning, make sure you position the right product for the right suites, and we've given an indication here. And just to restate, we've got rid of E2. We haven't really got rid of it, E2. We've rebranded it. We've called it E1. So all the feature set and functionality that was available in E2 is now available in E1. So we've actually added to the functionality of what was E1, and it is our entry level, $8 a month retail pricing for that particular SKU. Now the problem with this is something I found when I was a seller, is that the competition will get hold of public pricing and basically get you to say, how much is it going to cost for 10,000 users? Well, yeah, it's kind of 8 times 10,000. Avoid that at all costs. If you do not have access to the customer price list, if the customer has not shared with you the pricing for that particular customer, then I suggest you need to go and talk to the customer, the LA, or the Microsoft account manager to find out what the true pricing is. Don't be upset if you're an SI if they don't share that, because the contract is between the customer and the license provider, and that is a private affair. But never, ever quote, if you're going for a services contract, try not to avoid quoting for how much you think the software is going to be worth. You will be surprised how much the customer might actually pay for it based on what you think they're going to pay for it. Just to restate, software assurance under EA, I can move all my current users on software assurance for certain products with no change in my pricing. I basically keep paying the same amount, and then move on to the Office 365 subscription service. Yes, sir. No problem. Yep. Yep. Yes. Yeah, I'll talk about some channels later on. So we talk a lot about the SKUs. I'm just going to jump through here. Hang on a second, I bounced too fast. I want to go now. We talk about targeted offers. Move forward. So when we talk about our SKUs, we try and keep it simple. We just talk about targeted offers per marketplace. And you've probably already noticed for the enterprise, the bias is towards E3. That doesn't stop customers buying E1. It's just that's the preferred pitch that we'll make, and the customer has the choice later on to decide which of the suites they're actually going to purchase at the end of the day. The other thing to note, and I'm going to go back to my original statement around, is it enterprise-wide across the multiple, every single desktop, every single device within the company? The other thing to note is potentially under the enterprise agreement, they may have products that aren't actually on there. They may purchase products through something we call Select. Typically, the enterprise doesn't purchase on the open volume licensing. Anybody here not understand open, Select, and enterprise agreement? These are just volume licensing programs that we have in place, typically positioned by the size of the customer. A customer typically uses Select for discretionary purchase. So they have software across every single desktop, stick it on the EA. I have some software which I'm going to buy tactically for a department, but it's not going across the entire area. Those, we actually have standalone offers, so you can actually buy a single workload. There is a price for this workload. And of course, if you did the maths, or the customer did the maths, if they added up all the different workloads and tried to apply it to the suite price, they would find the suite price was cheaper. There is price compression based on the suite, but if you want to deploy a single workload, there are SKUs out there that the customer can purchase. So giving you an illustration of the individual workloads that we have available. These ones have been around for a while, but have changed in terms of capability and function, but as SKUs on a price list, they've been around for a while. And then we've added some new services on here. And actually, this slide doesn't have Yammer on it, but just to make it clear, I mentioned Project Online earlier. You can buy that as a standalone. So if the customer doesn't have it, wants a standalone service, they can buy it. Yes.
We have some customers who are on an EC plan.
Yep.
And they would like to buy, but they bought it through MAPI.
Yeah.
And they want to buy Yammer. And now they're quite upset that they don't get any discount on buying Yammer
because it's all through enterprise agreement. Yeah.
Is there any plans on changing that?
We will always assign value to the EA first. So the differentiation will be a customer of an enterprise size should be purchasing its software under an EA. So we don't want to encourage the idea of direct purchase from enterprise customers because we're effectively, they're going to end up paying more than they should do. So the answer to that is no. We basically want to make sure that we maintain value for the EA. Yeah.
The other thing they're upset about is that the pricing models are very different on Yammer than they are on Office 365. So, the Yammer team wanted to pay 3 years upfront
Yeah.
versus monthly or versus yearly.
Yeah.
Is that something that's going to be more in line with other Microsoft cloud products?
I can't talk in detail about the Yammer integration work that's currently going on, but without being specific about Yammer, I would anticipate that any software acquisition that we make will eventually integrate into the mainstream of our licensing. It just doesn't make sense to have two different models. So whilst I have nothing to announce about that specifically today, I would anticipate that would be a sensible thing to do, and that's a personal view. So moving on, in terms of channel availability, I just wanted to look at this, and I wanted to talk about the different channels that we have available. So I'm not a great fan of transitions, but here we go. If you want to know where you can buy Office 365 today, you can buy it on the following programs: full package product, open, syndication, advisor, and EA. Now, from an SI's perspective, and apologies to people who are running a disti, from a SI, pure SI perspective, the two things that you'll be interested in is the EA. Do the customer have an enterprise agreement? Find out if they do. Or the advisor model. It's a standalone workload. They haven't got any Office 365 in the customer, and they haven't got the product on the EA. We want to bring it in. We want to sell it direct, and you can make some money out of it too through the advisor model. Who in the building here is just a straight up and down SI? Who just is an SI consulting company? 1, 2. Any other SIs in here? No? So we've got 2 SIs. Is the advisor model of interest to you? It is. Is it something you do today? Okay, good. Good. One of the big changes this time around in Office 365, I believe, is the way that we deploy Office 365 Client. For those who've attended the previous 3 days, you would have seen how we do that. One of the things I would advise, if you're looking at deploying a service, Lync, SharePoint, Exchange, then you really need to think about how you're going to deploy the client. We sell the Office 365 client under the different suites that we have. You can buy it standalone if you so wish. But one of the things I would encourage you to avoid is, or actually I wouldn't encourage you to avoid, I would encourage you to promote with a customer is that they can control the way that this is deployed within their organization. The reason is we make a big deal about side-by-side installs with the older version, the idea being it's this click-to-run technology that we bought. It used to be a company called Softricity. We took it, we made it a lot better than it was. Allows you to run 2 instances of Excel side by side together so you can remove the blocker of maybe migrating a critical app. Finance are running their entire company off Excel. But the thing you've got to make sure is when talking about selling Office 365 or Project or Visio, because you will use the same technology, they're all getting the 5-user license, they're all getting the on-demand roaming, is that there are ways to control the deployment. So don't try and get blocked when selling the Office client by the fact that the deployment is just Microsoft pushing stuff down and there's no control over it. Large enterprises potentially want to control that. So a bit more, actually this is a good slide. I'm not going to go into detail. It's not a technical session, but really just gives you an idea of the 3 different ways that we're highlighting for deploying any Office 365 client application. Now, that, in terms of licensing, is all I was going to talk to you about today. The deck that I'm going to give you, that you'll have access to, and by the way, I just want to remind people, if you haven't registered for the session today, please make sure you do register, because then you'll get the invite to the SkyDrive, where the PowerPoints are already loaded. Who here has already picked up the PowerPoints? I saw a couple of SkyDrivers flipping up there. That's what happens when you sit at the back. So it is actually the full licensing deck. So it does go into all the different products that we have there and gives you a breakdown from it. But I think in terms of the call to action, I would say in regarding licensing, the one thing I want to encourage you to make sure is that the customer uses the right licensing vehicle appropriate for them. And if you don't want to be a licensing expert, find out who they have that contract with, and they will resolve that for you. The last thing I want to see is with a customer with a fixed budget spending more money on licensing than they need to, and they can, of course, spend more money on consulting if they release some of that money backwards. And because at the end of the day, or you could say, hey, you make more money, but the customer's going to complain to us when they find out, hey, we bought it direct, or we bought it this, and now we got stuck, and now we have this whole issue of moving around. It is important to make sure that you sell the right SKU, and I would encourage you default to the SKU and work backwards from that point. Don't start on the small one and move up, and then make sure that they make the right choices. So that is actually the end of the licensing presentation.